Are you struggling with feelings of self-doubt, even though you're accomplished? If so, you are not alone, and it's likely to be imposter syndrome. Did you know that 78% of professionals experience these paralysing thoughts during their career? I'm joined by imposter syndrome life coach and fire engineer Jason McDaid to learn actionable strategies to combat it. In this episode of Architecture Business Club, a weekly podcast for small firm founders who want to build their dream business in architecture and enjoy more freedom, flexibility and fulfillment in what they do. I'm John Clayton, your host. Having spent over 20 years working in architecture, I know how hard it can be to explain your services so people truly understand and value what you do. Many firms struggle with this, but by sharing your stories on podcasts, you can become the trusted voice in your market, grow your brand, and attract much better clients. We can help you with everything from podcast strategy and launch, production and management, podcast hosting and guesting, through to promoting and growing your show. If you'd like to discover how podcasting could benefit your business, click the link in the show notes to book a no-obligation chat about working with me. Or if you're interested in being a guest on this show, email John, that's Jon, at architecturebusinessclub.com. Now let's talk about imposter syndrome. Jason McDaid is a fire engineer and a life coach specialising in imposter syndrome and the impact this is having on professionals working in the construction industry. He provides one-to-one coaching and in-person imposter syndrome workshops called the 78% Club, 78% being the first stat that Jason heard about how many people experience imposter thoughts and feelings during their career. To connect with Jason on LinkedIn, just click the link in the show notes. Jason, welcome to Architecture Business Club.
Thanks, John. Great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And this is a topic that I'm really keen to explore with you because it's definitely something that, I've definitely experienced it. So, this is going to be a really worthwhile discussion today. Before we dig into it, though, I always like to ask people what they enjoy doing in their free time outside of their work. And I know that you enjoy doing field archery, which I know practically zero about. So could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, a field archery, the way I describe it to people, it's like golf with bows and arrows. So you're in shooting 3D targets. So there's some targets are like a 6-foot black bear, or there might be a turtle who's this size, or, there's a variety of targets. You could be shooting anything from 18 meters to 60 meters away. And it's all done in a forest. So you're walking through the forest, and like golf, you do hole 1, hole 2. In field archery, you do this, and you're walking up mountain slopes and down and shooting over rivers and different things. So, yeah, it's a great experience. It's beautiful to get up on a Sunday morning or a Saturday morning, and 8 o'clock in the morning, you're walking through the forest, sound of eagles and foxes and all sorts of stuff there. So, yeah, it's a really great occupation, great for the mind, and a great social thing as well. We do leagues, and my league final was on Sunday, and we actually won. So it's my team won. The first thing I've been involved in that I've won since I was about 15 playing soccer. So it was a good day for me anyway. So.
Oh, that sounds awesome. And that sounds like so much fun. Yeah, I'm gonna Google field archery after we finish this interview, because that sounds like something that I would really enjoy. I bet my son would enjoy it as well. So,
it's great. There's kids there from 6-7 years old to 70-year-old people, and they're all in the league together. They're all there. You'd have a 6-year-old, a 50-year-old, and it's great. It really is. And archery is one of the most basic human things, it's like 8,000 years old or something like that, so you really do feel you get a bit of a connection back to the old ways, and not much has changed. A bow is slightly different, but it's still a string with an arrow, and yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out. So, Jason, we're going to talk about imposter syndrome so that we can try and normalize it. I think a great place for us to start would just be for you to just explain to us what is imposter syndrome? What are your thoughts on what imposter syndrome is?
So there, there are a lot of definitions out there about what imposter syndrome is, and there's a lot of what it isn't and stuff. So none of the definitions really quite hit the mark with me. So I like to go with Dr. Valerie Young, her description of the three core traits of an imposter. And Valerie Young is the prime voice in the imposter syndrome field. She's been working for over 40 years in it. So from her research and experience, she's come up with these three common traits. First one, you believe that you're not as intelligent, as capable, or as talented as others believe you to be, despite there being evidence to the contrary. So you can't internalize your success. Your boss can see it, other people can see it. You've got a good job, pay rise, but you can't believe that yourself. The second trait then is that you chalk up your success and your achievements to some external factors. So it could be a computer glitch, it could be an admin error, like they've sent the acceptance letter to the wrong guy and some other poor fella got my rejection letter and, there was some mistake or something happened that I got the job by accident or for some other reason. It wasn't down to my skill or down to me being good or deserving. It was something external. And the third factor then is the one that really ties them in, is that you live in fear of being exposed for the fraud that you believe you are. So because you don't believe you're intelligent enough or talented enough to have got the job, because you attribute your success and achievements to external factors, you believe you're a fraud, an imposter, and you're living in fear of this day coming where you're going to get exposed. So the email from your boss landing in your inbox or your boss phone number coming on your phone or, you see your boss coming down the corridor and you're going, oh man, he's going to call me in now and he's going to tell me you've been caught. We know what you are. You've been rumbled. Now get out. And, so that's the fear that the imposter lives with, is this fear of being exposed. And for me, it was being sent home in humiliation to my family, to go home to my wife and say, yeah, I've been caught out. I've been sacked, and that's the end. We have to leave the house. We have to, I was so far down the road as going, my daughters can't even get married because I can't afford their wedding. If I lose this job, that's me, because who else will hire me? So that's where that third point ties in the first two. So you don't believe you're as intelligent as others believe you are, despite evidence to the contrary, and you put down your success to some external factor.
Geez, that is such a horrible thing to experience, yet so many of us do experience it at some point in our lives, and often on a frequent basis. You've mentioned to me before, we mentioned in the introduction, that 78% of people experience imposter syndrome. Why do you think it's so common?
And so the answer, again, going back to Valerie Young, she put it in such a good way, is that because we're humans, raised by humans, that's why we experience it, because we've all grown up with other people like our parents, our teachers, our coaches, caregivers, our aunties, our uncles. They're all influencing us in different ways. And, our mistakes, praise was tied to achievement, mistakes were made to sound bad, so we grew up into adulthood with this kind of constant definitions of success or failure, and we always were trying to meet these standards. And often discouraging remarks can last a lifetime. You could have heard something casually said by your uncle or a coach or your father, and when you were 8 or 9, and it may have just gone with you. It's, why couldn't you have done better, or where was the extra 5%? So you put your own self-worth into your achievement. And then if you if you weren't getting this achievement in later life, if you were one of these people whose parents praised everything they ever done. Oh, you're an artist every time you put your hand in a bit of paper with a bit of paint. Or if you were the kind of kid who rhymed off pi to 15 decimal places on your 5th birthday, but your dad just says, oh, get out of the way of the TV, I'm watching the horse race. And all these things can impact it. So it's a lot of societal, or a lot of family background stuff like that. But then there's also societal stuff like if you're a part of a minority, gender, race, neurodivergent, you also can carry the weight of representing your whole group. Are you the first kind of blind person to work in the job? Are you the first person of color in the office? Is everybody going to judge your race on your performance? So there's a lot of different things like that. Most people assume that they're the only ones feeling it, and that's the thing with imposter syndrome. It's such an isolationist feeling. But when as you introduced or said during the introduction about the 78% club, I said, 78% of people are feeling this, that, and it is that common. So that led me to going into this research. Why is it so common? And it's just because that's human nature. It's how we're brought up. Our parents were brought up by our grandparents who didn't have any idea either about it, So it's just, we're here because we're human, and the systems we live in, they're often designed to reward performance and punish vulnerability.
Yeah. Does everyone experience it in the same way?
No, because there's such a 78% of people experiencing it. That figure is not set in stone either. It varies up and down. But imposter syndrome shows up in lots of different ways because it has such a number of sources and backgrounds. So there are 5 commonly referred to competence types that we set these standards, these unacceptable or unattainable standards for our own competence, and we try and we base our own self-worth on that. So the 5 competence types are perfectionist. So if you feel that anything less than 100% is a failure, you got the whole auditorium is clapping, but one person is sitting looking at their watch and you're going, oh, it's crap. So that's the perfectionist. The expert, which would be my type, who believes they'll never know enough. I have to keep doing course and course and course just so that I could go, right, I'm qualified enough to do this. And this is my first ever podcast appearance, and this lends nicely into the expert, because when are you qualified enough in imposter syndrome to go on a podcast and talk about it? So I've said I'm qualified enough. I don't have to go, and I'm not that I've got a degree in it or anything. I'm enough with what I know, so I'm not going, I need to do one more course and then I'll call John and I can go on. Then there's the soloist who thinks that asking for help is failure. I should be able to do it myself. If I have to ask for help, then people will think that I'm incompetent and I'll be exposed. There's the natural genius who thinks they should be able to get everything in the first go. So you're given a project, and if there's something in it you can't work out, you think, oh my God, I'm crap, I'm incompetent, I'm the worst. Again, it's like the soloist, you can't ask for help or taking time to learn something. That just doesn't sit right with you. And the final competence type is the super person, with superhuman. It's largely attributed to women, because, not in a sexist way, but because, like the old saying, a woman is expected to work like she doesn't have a family, and she's expected to parent like she doesn't have a career. So women can be expected to do the minding of the kids, making the dinner, going, dropping the kids off, collecting them, doing this, doing the washing, all that. That's not to say that men don't do that, but women have taken on, or that role has been foisted upon them. So they feel that I have to be a good parent, have to be a good engineer, a good architect, have to be good at sports, so they're the 5 competence types. And most people will identify with one primarily and bits of others, and they're not set in stone. But so knowing your type isn't about labeling yourself, it's just about understanding your patterns and realizing that these are almost coping strategies. They're not flaws. We just need to work out why we feel we have defined our competence like this.
I think definitely, I think the one that stood out to me most with how I would identify it would perhaps be the perfectionist. But I think there's definitely some of the other types that you mentioned that I can see that there's been times when I've been, more aligned with that other type. So maybe that's kind of the primary one for me, I would say. Maybe the others are,
that's the way it is. You have one dominant really, and then you'll always be able to draw on others as well. I'd be a bit of a soloist and a natural genius as well, because they're tied into my idea of my competence. It's going, oh, I don't know enough. I don't know that straight away. I don't know enough on it. I can't ask for help because if I ask for help, so it's a snowball effect. But yeah, the expert, when I read the expert first, I went, that's me.
Yeah.
100%.
Know thyself. Okay. So how does it manifest or show up in people?
So with the competence types, we have they're subconscious. We don't really know about them. And then the way that it shows up is we have introduced or developed coping and protection mechanisms to adjust for this. So say procrastination is a very common one. So procrastination as a coping strategy means we never finish something. We keep putting it off. So if we don't finish it, it can't get judged, can't get reviewed. It'll get getting put off. We may get given out to about it, but we haven't been judged. And procrastination it allows us to feel like we're doing something and making progress, but we just don't want to get to that finish point because that's the point where our competence is laid bare and we're out.
There's a risk of failure. We feel like this, what if it's not going to work?
Yeah, that's it. You're putting your competence up. It's like going for a review. I always describe it as like a hedgehog lying on its belly with its little soft underbelly exposed for the eagles to come in and just, you've got all its protective spines are underneath, but you're just exposed. So that's what it's like when you expose yourself to review or to anything about your competence. So procrastination is one, flying under the radar is another. You just keep low, don't put your hand up for new jobs, don't say anything, don't speak in meetings, be the grey man, just coast along and hope nobody sees you. A big one with me was switching jobs, moving targets. It's called, a moving target is hard to hit. I called it parachuting. That was my own term I came up with before I even knew about imposter syndrome. And my parachute was always another job. I had it kept, it was like a parachute whenever I felt the net was closing in, that I was about to be exposed. I'd just jump out of the plane and pull the parachute and I'd be like, so long, suckers, you should have caught me at the time. You had your chance, but now I'm gone. So I'm somebody else's problem now. And I would go in and it was parachuting and peacocking. So the parachuting would be jumping out of the old job, and the peacocking would be landing into the new job with chest puffed out like a peacock and the feathers up. I'm brilliant and I'm great. And you get this 2-3 month kind of window of people not really knowing. And then the net starts to come in again and you're going, oh, I'm going to get this email or I'm going to get the knock on the door. And that's when the parachute would start getting put back on again. So there's a constant cycle of job hopping. And this denies you of stuff as well, denies you of progression within a company, because you can't stay in one company long enough. So you keep joining in at, whatever levels. People don't find out your skills. Same with procrastination. You hold yourself back and you might get a bad reputation in the office as somebody who's slower than the other people. Flying under the radar, you're not putting your hand up so people don't see you and you're not in line for the next promotion or the job offer or something, so they really do hold us back. And that's part of the work we're doing, the 78% Club. Now I've started running these boot camps. It's 1 hour a night for 3 nights in a row. And it's just to identify the coping mechanisms because they're so central to it all. And just identifying them and working out, almost shaking off your shoulders and kind of going, oh yeah, Jesus, I'm a perfectionist who procrastinates. What's that about? And just that alone is helping people just to to breathe and see it, and as you said, to normalize it and just go, yeah, this doesn't have to be me. And by doing it in a group setting, we're seeing that we're not the only one in the office. So the 78% club might be 8 out of 10 people. So if you're in an office of 10 people and you're thinking you're the only one who's crap, really there's 7 others around you who are thinking the same, but nobody's saying it. So, it's about bringing it into the open.
Oh, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Could you share an example of how you think imposter syndrome might show up for, say, an architect or an engineer?
Yeah, like the architecture and engineer, they're design-based careers. You're, especially with architecture, you're given a task to, depending on what stage of your career you're at, you might be given a blank page and told design the building, or you might be given a wall, or, design this junction of a wall, so you're having to design. So design careers, like engineering as well, because you're having to come up with these, especially in fire engineering, we have to come up with a design. And when you design something and put it out for review, by nature, that's a heart-stopping moment. For me, it always was. Anyway, the report review was a nightmare. It was, here's my competence, please comment on it. It's like, again, the hedgehog with his belly open. So, and with architecture, you're presenting a design to a client. You might have worked on it for a couple of weeks. The deadline is coming up and you're almost ready to do it, but you've got this voice going, no, this isn't good enough to do. You're in this big architecture company and here's you with this crappy little design. How are they? This isn't going to pass with them. And especially if you're, say, in a big company who was winning awards for their architecture. And I was doing a talk with a games design company who had one of the gods of game design. He was the owner of the company, and he's got, your staff must feel imposter syndrome, because how are they meant to come with their little idea to you going, here, this is my idea for a game, when you've designed one of the biggest games in the world? So it's like that with architecture and other careers too, that these people who are winning awards and are owning their own business, and you're just a guy there going, oh, here's my plan, or, maybe they've put something out. Like, anybody got any ideas? You're in the meeting and you're going, oh, I'd love to say this, but you just can't. You can't do it because you're thinking that is the stupidest idea anybody's ever going to have said in this room. And then somebody else says, oh, what about this? And you're going, oh, that was very similar to my idea, oh, brilliant, well done. So that's
interesting. I think people like architects and engineers, architecture technologists, and a lot of design professionals and creatives generally, that we're often very close to our work, particularly if you're doing like a technical service provider. You put a lot of yourself into your work. You put a lot of time and energy into it, and because of that, it can be hard when you come to that point where you're presenting it to somebody, either whether it's to a senior colleague or whether it's directly to the client, that if you do get some feedback about it that's maybe not, oh, we love it, it's amazing. We sometimes struggle to separate us from our work, and it's the feedback on the work. We can, if there is any negative feedback, we can end up taking it so personally. And it's like, oh, I'm terrible at my job. I don't know what I'm doing. I've been exposed as this chancer that's, bumbled his way through his career so far, and I've been found out now, and my client doesn't like my design, like the world's ending, it's terrible. Remember, don't forget to join the waitlist for our membership community, where you can meet other business owners who want the same thing as you. A thriving business that gives you more freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment. Just go to architecturebusinessclub.com/waitlist or click the link in the show notes and enter your details so you don't miss out on this amazing opportunity to improve your business and your life. And if you're enjoying the show, then please leave a 5-star review or rating wherever you listen to podcasts. Now back to the show.
It's when we assign or attribute our self-worth to this piece of work, I'm putting me as a person and everything about me will you please review it? No, it just all depends on your review of this report. That has absolutely nothing to do with me as a person or previous or anything. But yeah, it's that exposing our inner whatever it may be to this thing. And yeah, you do put a lot of yourself, and because what you put onto the page is generally your understanding of the task at hand, it almost does in some way represent your level of competence in this thing, But that doesn't say that even higher up people don't make mistakes. My boss used to get me to review their reports, and I'd find typos, I'd find errors, and we'd talk. But even still, when they come back to me with my report reviews, and back in the old days when it was done in pen and paper and there was big red circles,
Oh, the dreaded
was like that,
Yeah, the dreaded red pen.
Yeah.
Used to use that a lot. I used to when I started out. There was a lot of red pen on my drawings when I was doing architectural work, and then it did get to a point where I'd get the red pen out for some other colleagues' work. It didn't feel so bad when it was a bit both ways, Yeah. How can we tell if the feelings that we're experiencing, like how can we tell if that is just like healthy self-doubt or if it's actually imposter syndrome?
Yes, that's a really important question, because imposter syndrome, it's in the media a lot if you're discussing it. If you're not, you won't see these discussions. But a lot of people are on saying, imposter syndrome is a good thing because it keeps you knowing you're on the right direction, or means you're trying, you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. So imposter syndrome is a good thing. But the difference between healthy self-doubt and imposter syndrome goes back to that first question with the answer about the fear of it. So self-doubt says, this is new, so it makes sense that I'm unsure. So if you've got a promotion to a totally new level and you're nervous and what if I can't do it? That's healthy self-doubt, because you're going into a new level, you have new responsibilities, new people looking at you, expecting stuff from you. It's only natural that you feel this self-doubt. And self-doubt can be lessened over time. So the first month might be, oh, geez, what's happening? Second month, I think I'm getting the hang of that. Third month, things are going better. You're receiving good feedback and you're going, oh, that's good. They're happy enough with me so far. So healthy self-doubt decreases with time and with feedback. So because you can internalize the feedback, just like you mentioned in your last comment about you get a bit of constructive criticism or something, or a red pen in your report and you take it, oh no, that's, you've cut my soul open with that. Healthy self-doubt can take praise. It can even take a bit of, criticism is hard for anybody, but it doesn't break you down. But imposter syndrome is, they've made a mistake picking me for this job. I was clinging on to dear life with just trying to handle the old job, and now they've put me into a new one. I'm a fraud. It's going to take, it's only a matter of time before I'm found out. And you're living in that fear. So the healthy self-doubt is natural. It's a good thing. And it's like, yeah, it makes sense that I'm feeling this, or I'm the first person in my family to go to college. Yes, that can make sense that I'm feeling a bit anxious about it because, the family are all looking at me and I've got a lot to prove maybe. But it's one of those things that healthy self-doubt should decrease. Imposter syndrome will increase, and imposter syndrome even gets worse with praise, because if somebody says, oh, well done, and you're going, oh, no, it says I only got that because I overworked. I put in 3 weeks work into it, or I done something, or I fluked it or something, and now I've got a good response from it. Now I have to match that again the next time, and I don't know how I done it the first time, even though you done it out of your good work and you got a good response, but now you've put this pressure on of there's a standard, now I can't fall below that. So you have to work even harder and harder and keep going, and the imposter syndrome builds until, with me, the lowest point for me was standing at a roundabout, a little small roundabout in Galway. A little narrow one, was just paint on the road, little bump, so it wasn't a big thing. And there was a double-decker bus coming along. flying along, and my thoughts going through my head was, if this bus driver loses this even just slightly, he'll just clean me out of it on the corner. And I was going, do you know what? That would be the end of all this stress. That would be it, all over. My family would be sorted. They'd have my insurance policy. Everything would be over. And I didn't step out of the way. And that to me is imposter syndrome, and all that it brought on, all the depression and the burnout and everything culminated in me standing there taking my chances that a bus driver was going to take the roundabout well. And he did. Off he went, oblivious to the moment that he had just been involved in, you know. But that's where imposter syndrome goes. Healthy self-doubt goes, yeah, we'll hope this works. So,
oh, geez. Well, look, thank you for sharing that personal story there, Jason. That I mean, for this to have been something for you that's affected you so much, to be in that kind of position where you'd have those thoughts going through your head, that's pretty scary. I'm so glad that you're in the place that you are now.
yeah,
That, you're actually positioned to be able to, you've overcome that, and you're now actively helping out other people that are struggling with similar issues. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, that's what's led me to here. That point is basically why I'm here now. After that, I got help, went to therapy, done different things, found life coaching, and I found imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome allowed me to tie the other things together. I described in one place my journey down into the darkness, and there was depression, there was burnout, there was this, there was that. But imposter syndrome I described as the cloak that I wore on this journey. It was with me. It was the jacket that was on through the whole thing. It was the common point of it all. So yeah, it's a very personal thing to me, sort of.
Yeah. So if somebody's experiencing this, which no doubt they are, if someone's listening to this and they've experienced some of these feelings of imposter syndrome, what can a person do to help themselves? I mean, have you got any quick tools that you can share?
Yeah, like a lot of imposter syndrome work is about reframing. So it's reframing our thoughts. That's one thing we have to know about imposter syndrome, is that it's thoughts, it's thought patterns. If this happens, then I think this, and then my body reacts like that. And it's a lot of central nervous system and fight or flight mode and all this. So basically about reframing our thoughts. So I can do a quick little exercise with you if you want. So it's just a kind of a 3-question little tool, we call it. So you can think of a recent moment where you felt like an imposter or fraud. It could be a meeting, a mistake, a challenge, something that happened.
Okay, so I'm trying to think of a good example. So I suppose I've relatively recently started working with other companies to produce podcasts for them, so other companies and organisations. And when I was first asked to do that, there was definitely some thoughts there of, those sort of feelings of imposter syndrome.
So we'll go with that. So now the first question is, what's the main story that you're telling yourself? What's the negative voice that you're...
So in that context, the negative voice would be, well, I'm still just a well-meaning amateur at this. Why would anybody want to invest their money in me, to help them in that capacity? Because there's other production companies out there that have been going for, like over a decade. And, well, I've only been podcasting for, about 18 months. So, like, who am I to offer that service and to get paid to do that for other businesses and organisations?
Yeah. So I think your first line in it was probably the clincher. I'm just a well-meaning amateur. Did I get that right? So we'll go with that. So I'm just a well-meaning amateur. So question 2 is this 100% true 100% of the time? So if you take emotions out of it, or hunches or anything, and look at it objectively, are you just a well-meaning amateur? So, you have 18 months of podcasting experience, you've got dozens and dozens of episodes. So is that 100% true? Are you just a well-meaning amateur? Factually only?
Factually, no. Factually, most podcasters don't get beyond about 6 or 7 episodes, and I've been doing this week in, week out. We're at 85 plus episodes now without missing a beat for the last 18 months, and I've been living and breathing it every week for it would be not far off 2 years now.
So would you consider yourself factually to be a well-meaning amateur based on that?
No.
No, actually.
No,
so
not when you put it like that.
Yeah, when you look at it objectively, you take the hunches, the emotions, the everything else out. Your negative thought pattern was, I'm just a well-meaning amateur. But you go, oh, hold on a minute, I've been doing this. I've outlasted so many other podcasters. I'm living and breathing it. I can see you even smiling now. I can see you you've always got a sense of pride in you that I can see in your posture now, just because you seem to be kind of almost going, yeah, I'm actually doing quite well at this. So, so you've answered that. Is it 100% true? 100% of the time? No. I think we would go with that. So the third question then, if a friend or a colleague came to you in a similar situation with a similar issue and they told you their story, oh, I'm just well-meaning amateur, and you knowing them, what would you say to them? What would your advice be to them?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think if I can remember it, I would work through this little exercise with them to help them to reframe their thoughts. And I'd probably ask them some questions about the particular thing that they were thinking about. I would be asking some questions to try and find some evidence to the contrary, to try and challenge them on it, to say, well, actually, there's all this other evidence here that would tell me that that's actually not true all the time, or not true at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're on 86 podcasts and the rest are on Peter and out at 12, you're confidently and competently doing it. Yeah, you interrogate them and you try and challenge their thought pattern and cut all the emotion out of it, cut all, as I say, the hunches, the feelings, or what else. Factually, looking at it objectively, is that true? And generally, most people go, yeah, that's the advice I would give to my friends. Yeah, don't be stupid. One of my big exercises, it actually took me 12 and a half pages in 5 hours to do. And the very last line of it, well, I think I might have told you this before, I won't say the F word in it, but it was stop being an effing idiot. And that was my advice to myself, and I done an extra long version of that. It all kind of just, like these thoughts, they're just thoughts, and we have the power and the capability to change them. So this kind of exercise, just for the sake of this podcast, it's nice and short. It's three questions. But it is so powerful. It changed an awful lot for me, just this alone.
I love that. It reminds me of a conversation I had with Mark Franklin recently on the podcast. He talked about the 4 fears of business ownership. And I heard him talk at a conference recently, and he talked about which version of the story are you listening to? Is it the emotional version or is it the factual version? In the context of, there might be something that happened in your life, and if you're sort of looking at it from that emotional point of view, you can have all of those feelings that are then dictating what direction your life goes in afterwards and what choices you're making, and actually it's like, well, is this just my emotions playing havoc here, or is this actually what really happened? Is this actually the factual version of it? So yeah, it's just another way to kind of reframe things.
Yeah, reframing it is critical.
Yeah. This has been a really good conversation, Jason, but we want to try and wrap things up now. So what would be the main thing that you'd like everyone to take away from our conversation?
I suppose the main thing is that you're not alone. The 78% club, I didn't get the figure. It's not the 1% club, the 2% club. There's so many people out there feeling like this, so you're not alone, and the isolation of it for me was the hard part because I thought I was the only one. But knowing that there are other people there that's and experiencing the same thing, and that it's false thoughts, it's when you do it like that little exercise, is that actually true? And you go, no, it's not. I'm quite a experienced fire engineer. I've done football stadiums, high-rise buildings, this, that, the other. And once at a Christmas party, I overheard my boss saying, Jason's a really experienced fire engineer. I left the Christmas party about half an hour later and I handed him a notice a month later because I was going, oh my God, what's all this about? I thought that it was just me. They were going to catch me out. And so imposter syndrome isn't a personal feeling. It's a human response to pressure, comparison, to societal, the way society is, it's not good. There's a lot of people saying that imposter syndrome is a thing to keep women down and it's a thing to, but they're saying, why aren't we fixing the system? But we're not trying to fix the system with this. We're just trying to allow the person to see that they're not to blame and they're not as bad as they believe themselves to be. And it's to, allow us to accept the praise or accept the job offer and go, all right, I must be doing something good. So you don't need to fix yourself. You just need better tools, better language, and a bit of support. And that's what the 78% Club is about bringing people together to normalize it and just let them know that they're not all, incompetent. We can't all be incompetent, It's the world would collapse if the 78% were actually incompetent. So, and I think
true.
Yeah, I think a lot of the other 22 or whatever it is percent are probably lying as well. So,
yeah, quite possibly. Yeah. Was there anything else that you wanted to say about the topic that we haven't already covered?
No, I don't think so. I could talk for hours about it. I could just go into any one of those questions and just you could hit record and you could go make your dinner and come back and I'd still be here talking about it. So no, I think if anybody wants to know more about it, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a message. I'll reply to everybody's messages. I love talking about it because of my personal experience with it. It's something that I deeply connect with other people, and I'm happy to talk with anybody at any time about it. So feel free to just get in touch if you have any questions or anything about it. And, I'm always happy to talk.
That's great. Thanks for that, Jason. Just one last thing I wanted to ask. I love to travel and to discover new places, and I wondered if you could just share one of your favourite places and what you love about it.
This is probably the question I've struggled with most out of the whole thing. So I'd never got a chance to do much traveling. I went to Australia years ago, back before everybody else was there, and loved that. And came back, got married, had kids, done the Tenerifes and the different things like that. So never got to do much traveling. But one thing I do love is getting out in nature, and like with the archery, but I love being in storms. I love standing outside in a storm, in the wind. Not one of these people goes out in a category A storm or a red warning standing on the pier. But I love going down to the beach and an orange warning where it's not too dangerous. I'm just standing and feeling the waves smashing off the prom and the spray landing on there. I think just that to me, something about standing in a storm, especially near the sea, I think is just such a beautiful thing. So if you haven't stood on a beach in a storm, that's my recommendation for you to go and experience that. Just the power of nature blowing the sea into your face.
That's
in a safe
cool.
way.
In a safe way, yeah. In a safe way, yeah. You do feel very connected with nature when you do things like that. I know that when I've been out hill walking in the Lake District and the weather has turned and then it's got really blustery or rainy, and on one hand, there's a part of you that's thinking, I wish it was sunny, but then actually experiencing it, I don't know, there's as I say, there's that connection to nature, but there's also real drama to it as well. Yeah. It feels quite exciting,
Yeah, it's that man v nature thing.
Yeah, that's it. Bear Grylls style.
One of my favourite times years ago was about 15 years ago in Donegal, and from it went down to -18 for about 3 weeks or a month, and the snow was kind of up past your knees and stuff. And I used to have to walk into work in this, and my eyelids were freezing together when I'd blink and stuff. And I loved it. It was so hard and so tough, but it was just like you're saying there, it's just this thrill of you and nature. And, so that to me is where I like to travel. Someday I'll get to travel, and my kids are older now, so I might start getting places. I did go to Italy recently and went to Venice. And for anybody who's into history, I've never been anywhere like Venice for feeling like you're back in the plague time with the little old crooked walls and alleyways. And I loved that. I wasn't over near the canals at all. I was down walking through these little back alleys on my own and kind of getting lost. And like the walls were kind of here and they're bent. So yeah, I love reading about history and about the plague and stuff. So just experiencing that was something really special. So.
Oh, that's really cool. Jason, thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate you having a chat with me about this important topic. If people want to find out a little bit more about what you do you want to just remind everyone your website, where they can find you there?
Yeah, it's innergroovecoaching.com. So Inner Groove Coaching is my coaching umbrella, and the 78% Club is my imposter syndrome niche or baby or whatever, it's come out of that. So yeah, feel free to come on and have a chat anywhere and send me a message.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Jason.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me on. It's been a great experience.
Next time, I'm joined by Rachel Extance to talk about how to use your website like a magazine. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Architecture Business Club. If you liked this episode, think other people might enjoy it, or just want to show your support for the show, then please leave a glowing 5-star review or rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean so much to me and makes it easier for new listeners to discover the show. And if you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode. If you want to connect with me, you can do that on most social media platforms. Just search for @Mr. John Clayton. The best place to connect with me online, though, is on LinkedIn. You can find a link to my profile in the show notes. Remember, running your architecture business doesn't have to be hard, and you don't need to do it alone. This is Architecture Business Club.